Anxiety about the impending verdict wakened Nariman with a jittery stomach. 3 weeks had passed, and Dr. Terrapore was to visit today to pronounce upon the ankle. So far, Nariman had managed to hold out each morning till everyone nished tea and breakfast, and left for school and work. He took pride in sparing them his smell, but his bowels were letting him down this last day. "I'm sorry," he whispered to Roxana, "I don't dare delay, or it will be a bigger mess." "Don't be silly, Papa, if you need the bedpan you must have it." She made sure its edges were dry, as he turned slightly to one side to let her position it. Yezed was silent until the smell began to LL the room. He felt his gorge rise. Pushing his plate from him, he ed into the back room, and she followed. "Such a stink with my breakfast," he said, not caring to lower his voice. "You couldn't wait a few more minutes." "I could, but Papa couldn't." "Haven't you noticed, all these days? Not once has he done number 2 till you left the house. Why not the same today? Or does he want to give me a sample before leaving? Stop being disgusting." She walked away to the front room where the boys were teasing Nariman. "Chi, Grandpa," said Jangir. "It's an atom bomb." Murad said more like a hydrogen bomb. Yezid shouted from the back room to get out. It was not hygienic to eat in there. Millions of people live in the gutters of Bombay. Roxana shouted back. "Eating and sleeping next to drains and ditches. This whole city stinks like a sewer. And you are worried about Papa's bedpan? How stupid can you be? See that, Chief? She calls me stupid because of you. Is that fair?" "My daughter calls everyone stupid," observed Nariman softly. "Including me." Jangir was scared that another GHT was beginning, like the one about Grandpa's Susu bottle a few days ago. "I have a new joke, Daddy," he said. "Can I tell you?" "Later." "Please, Daddy, it's very funny." "All right," he said grouchily. "Once upon a time, some tourists were in Vienna, and they went to the Beethoven Museum where that's a stale joke, SCO Ed Murad. Everyone knows about Beethoven's last movement. I have a new one. I don't want any LTHY jokes," warned his mother. "But mine isn't LTHY. Just listen to it. Some tourists were in Vienna in the Beethoven Museum and you're copycatting mine," protested Jangir. "Let me nish, it's completely different, okay?" So the tourists went into a room where there was an open co-en with a body in it. All rotting and green, worms crawling out of it. The frowning face had a wide forehead and untidy hair, just like Beethoven's. Next to the co-en was a music stand with the manuscript of the Fifth Symphony. The tourists were upset. They asked the guide what was going on. He told them to be patient and watch the exhibit carefully. So they waited. Soon, the corpse raised a hand out of the co-en and erased a bar of music. A few seconds later, the hand came up again and erased another bar. The tourists were shocked. They asked the guide, "Isn't this the body of Ludwig van Beethoven? Why isn't he buried in the ground?" The guide said, "Please be calm, main Damon und Herren. Ja, this is Beethoven the composer. Ja, he is dead. And now he is slowly decomposing." Everyone laughed, and Roxana said she didn't know where the boys picked up these things. Jangir sensed he had been upstaged by Murad, but didn't mind. Together they had averted a GHT between Mummy-Daddy. Amid their clowning and teasing, she cleared away the bedpan. Before leaving for work, Yezid stopped beside Nariman's bed. "Good luck, Chief, when Dr. Terrapore comes." "Thanks, Yezid." Roxana waited at the door to kiss him. "Sorry I shouted," he said in her ear. "You know how I am about smells." She closed her eyes as his arm pressed her against him. "Can you do me a favor, Yezda? Ask the corner barber to come now for Papa's shave, before Doctor gets here." "Sure." He started down the stairs, then stopped. "If Jal and Kumi visit, don't let them bully you in Doctor's presence, don't agree to anything. Knowing them, they've forgotten the checkup is today," she said, reassuring him with a kiss. For Jal and Kumi, the 3 weeks were ending as they had begun, in squabble and confusion, fretting and arguing, feeling guilty about what they had done, lacking the strength to put it right. They were ashamed of visiting their sister, and not all their toys and knickknacks in the showcase could distract them from their torment. More than the present, the future worried Kumi. Even if Papa's ankle mended, letting him move around a little, it wouldn't be long before he was bedridden again. Dr. Terrapore had warned that Parkinson's would incapacitate him. The kind of nursing it would require, Terry ed her. She and Jal had really made a valiant effort, she felt. What was the use of denying your limitations? And if Roxana had any decency, she would keep her father for longer. "What?" exclaimed Jal in disbelief. "In that tiny at? This is Papa's house. I can't have him back, please don't force me. I haven't even found a servant to replace Foola, the sweeping and swabbing is breaking my back. For days I've begged you to end a way out. Not one suggestion have you aired." Which was not surprising, since Jal wanted to accept the inevitable, bring Papa home. "Be reasonable, Kumi. We said 3 weeks, we must keep our word. If Roxana can look after him, so can we. We? You run out every morning to the Share Bazaar. And 3 weeks does not balance the 15 years I've looked after him. If you're feeling noble, stay home and nurse Papa. Otherwise, use your head and think of something. Time is running out, the doctor comes today." But he had no suggestions when they set out at 6:30, and endured her in silence till they arrived at Pleasant Villa. Dusk had fallen, and the stairwell was half dark. Jal tried to locate the switch in the lobby. He blundered into the wrong corner, into cobwebs, and retreated, clawing at his face to get the strands. They began climbing in the gloom. As they rounded the RST landing, the lights went on. They heard Someone on the aisle below, taking the steps two at a time. They're in a hurry, let them pass, whispered Zhao. We're RST, said Kumi. Whoever it is will wait. Always you let people take advantage. Behind them, Yezed was closing the gap. How like a long married couple they were, he thought, rather than brother and sister. Kumi's right, Zhao, he called over the banister. You must stand up for yourself. Oh. Yezed, said Kumi. Sorry, didn't know it was you. Not at all, you have as much claim to the stairs as me. So how are you both? Come to take Papa home? Layering care and concern over her panic, she said, we missed him. I hope doctor says he is all right now. Oh, he's been all right for 3 weeks, hasn't he? Shisu aired the dart without response. They reached the top oar and he used his latchkey, calling out to warn Roxana, hello. Look who I found on the stairs. Greetings were exchanged, familial niceties completed, and they stood at their stepfather's bedside. You seem much better than 3 weeks ago, Papa, said Kumi. This visit has been good for you. And a lovely shave as well, said Zhao. See those pink cheeks. Going on a date, Papa? Yes, with Destiny. But you're still lying down, said Kumi, staying in the lighter vein. I thought doctor might have taken you for a trial walk. And I thought you might have forgotten where you left me. What a thing to say, Papa. I was just telling Yezid how much Zhao and I missed you. Come, Roxy, don't make us worry, what did doctor say? What's the rush, relax, have some tea RST, said Yezid, though he too was anxious to know. And Zhao, smiling, moved towards the dining table. Love to, but we are in a hurry, said Kumi, before her brother could sit. We want to go to Temple to or thanks for Papa's recovery. Good, I'll go with you, said Nariman, and then we'll head for home. That's lovely, said Kumi, her smile a rictus of dismay. That means doctor gave the okay to get up? Have you tried out your crutches? Oh Papa, stop teasing her, said Roxana. She wished she could have shared the news alone with Yezid RST, Dr. Terapor's explanation about the pills for Parkinson's disease and its main ingredient, L-Dopa, and the side effects. Dr. Terapor had said they were not to worry, disconcerting though it may be if her father rambled incoherently. Stopping the pills would mean losing complete control of his limbs. She didn't want to spout all this before Zhao and Kumi, and stuck to the ankle. Doctor told Papa to wait till next week to get up. He removed some plaster today, look. She lifted the sheet, the cast, which used to encase his leg from the thigh downwards, and the entire foot, was somewhat reduced at both ends. His toes were exposed, and the knee. Kumi began to sense a reprieve. That must feel more comfortable for Papa. So what happens now, asked Yezad. This week, I mean? Doctor needs Papa at Parsi General for an X-ray in 8 days. This week is up to us. Excuse me, it's up to me, said Nariman. And I want to go home now. Really, Papa, how insensitive, said Kumi. You want to end poor Roxy and Yezet? This is home as well, isn't it? Meeting with silence, she continued, you can come back with us now, Papa. But that means calling 1 ambulance to take you from here to Chateau Felicity, a 2nd ambulance next week to take you to hospital for X-ray. Then a 3rd one to take you home again. Don't worry, we'll share the expense, said Yezid. It's not the money, she protested. It's the risk, each time those Jungli ambulance civilas grab Papa and throw him on their stretcher. God forbid, if they twist something, imagine the pain and ensuing and prolonging of his recovery. Everyone paused while this dire forecast hung in the air. Then, to her surprise, Kumi received support from an unexpected source. She's right, Chief. You should stay on, it's just 8 more days. Roxana looked gratefully at her husband while Kumi tried not to appear too relieved. Is there enough medicine for a week, she asked. Or shall I get more? They began counting the pills, and one fell to the oar. Kumi bent to her knees to retrieve it. The delay she wanted was hers, she thought, but the inevitable had merely been postponed by a week. After that, what? As she hunted for the fallen pill, she noticed the plaster removed by Dr. Terapor. The bits lay on a sheet of newspaper under the teapoy, fragments large and small, some of them still holding the curve of Nariman's leg. And suddenly it came to her. There was the solution, staring her in the face. Yes, the medicine is enough for 10 days, announced Roxana, nishing the count. Good, said Kumi. And Papa will be home before then. Oh look, there's the pill, under the chair. She picked it up, then they said goodbye, making arrangements to meet at Parsi General in a week. Don't you appreciate the beauty of it? Kumi asked, still trying a week later to convince Zhao. Isn't it amazing that the plaster from his own leg gave me the answer to our problem? But it's so deceitful, so destructive, so extreme, he tried yet again to dissuade her. You have another idea? Are you willing to do his bedpan and toilet from tomorrow? But he's getting better. Don't fool yourself. Papa will never get better. How will we live with this on our conscience? We'll get used to it. I'm sure conscience is easier to look after than Papa. To be honest, I cannot bear the thought of him back. In this 4-week gap, I have been remembering Mama and everything else more sharply. I remember Mama and her unhappiness too. But isn't it time to forgive? Did Mama have time to forgive him before she died, is what I'd like to know. We can't really be sure what happened, said Zhao wearily. You can think what you like, there is no doubt in my mind. You and I were both in the room when Mama and Papa had their last GHT. We both heard Mama's words before she went up to the terrace. He sighed. The more time passes, the more I feel there is no sense blaming anyone, it was just a sad, unhappy mess. Sometimes, life is like that. Stop the philosophy and do what needs doing. Go to Edelmunchi. Okay, don't yell, I'm going, said Zhao, and trudged down the stairs. She was always dredging up the past, he felt. It was abnormal, harboring so much anger after 30 years. And now she was using the past to justify keeping Papa away, unable to overcome her revulsion for the smelly sick room chores. Like himself. If only some of the share prices would go up, they could hire a hospital ayah, solve the problem peacefully. Instead of this crazy plan of hers. He prepared himself for meeting Edelmunchi and broaching the subject. He thought about Edel's wife, poor Manazé. He knew she rued the day when Edel had stopped at a second-hand bookstall and, among the books and magazines spread out on the footpath, come upon an American journal devoted to the do-it-yourselfer. Edel still told people the story of how he had found his calling, and preached the virtues of handiness to anyone who would listen. You know why America is a great country? Because they believe in do-it-yourself. And we are poor and backward because we don't. Now I understand what Gandhiji meant when he taught Svavlamban. With his doctrine of self-reliance, Mahatmaji was the RST genuine Indian do-it-yourselfer. His vision is true, DIY is the only way to save this country. He had embarked confidently upon this new path, and learned the handyman style of personifying the tools he worked with. He even had his own song, sung to the tune of Candyman. The handyman can cause he sees it with love and makes it work all right. Arriving at the Munchiat, Zhao stood at the door with its crooked nameplate and rang the doorbell. Since Edel had been shing it, the push button had to be jiggled and coaxed before it responded with an unpleasant jangling. Manazé opened the door. Edu. Upstairs, Zhao is here. Zhao waited, airing up a smile led with sympathy. In the beginning, Manazé had been so pleased with her husband's hobby, bragging to the building about his wonderful tools and gadgets. The things they could do left you gasping in amazement, she told her neighbors. But as time went on, she saw the devastation those same instruments could wreak. Edel's RST project had been the installation of wooden shelves in the kitchen. After days of work during which everyone, including the servant, watched with awe, Edel proclaimed, using what he presumed was an American accent, "Okay, Manazé, these babies are ready. Load 'em up." She placed 3 tins, one on each of the shelves, and stood back to admire the EECT. Seconds later, the shelves crashed to the ore. Edel was morty addition. How could his expensive, shiny tools betray him? He picked out the screws and brackets from the debris, blew the plaster dust, and examined them with a dazed anger. His broken heart mended in a few days, and he tackled the job. Again, the shelves staying up this time. But there were gaping holes in the wall plaster. And the patching he accomplished left the surface uneven as the wall of a mountain cave. Manazé assured him it was that for modern decor, interior designers recommended textured walls. Next, Edel had taken on a dripping tap and turned the leak into wood. Struggling through the Sunday morning, he did change the washer, addressing it as the slippery swine. But to open and shut the tap required the full strength of both hands. After a series of small jobs that he managed to convert into progressively larger disasters, Manazé took control of her husband's hobby. The rules were clear. Edel had to submit all his projects for her prior approval. Invariably overambitious, they were always refused. His dreams of installing new o-ring, performing a bathroom renovation, constructing built-in closets fell by the wayside. Occasionally, when she was certain it wouldn't leave ruin in its wake, he was allowed to undertake something modest, such as hanging a picture frame. For work on a larger scale, Edel had to satisfy his cravings away from home. He often tried to convince people to borrow his tools, which came with his services. Unfortunately, most of his friends and neighbors had grown aware of the hidden cost of the loan, and were not inclined to pay it. But Zhao was optimistic as he waited for Edel to appear. Not much harm could come of asking for a simple hammer, he thought. How are you, Edel? Champion, Zhao. You? Fine. Doorbell not working? Edel tried it, pushing the button this way and that till brief contact produced the unpleasant jangling. Manazé grimaced. Just needs a few more adjustments, he reassured her. Learning that Zhao wanted to borrow a hammer, he began to salivate. Tell me what you're doing. The right tool for every job, that's the handyman's motto. I have 3 types of hammer, claw, ball peen, and bricklayers. My gosh, Edel, you're really well equipped. A few basic tools, he said modestly. It's not how many, but how well you use them. So what's the job? Zhao hesitated. His lie shouldn't be too interesting or Edel would jump right in. Shoes. Shoes? Yes, some nails in my heels have popped out. Sure. Step inside, we'll bang them in. Not these, my other pair. At home. Kumi says well, we're both having heel trouble. Okay, I'll come with you. And handle my dirty shoes, said Zhao. Can't insult you like that. Don't worry, Zhao my son, we handymen are used to all kinds of dirt. Zhao had to think fast or he would soon be climbing upstairs with the handyman in tow. Can I be honest, Edel? We need your help later, a more difficult job. So let me do this alone, or Kumi will feel overobligated and won't ask for that favor. Edel's eyes grew large. What's the difficult job? A window. Fairly safe choice, thought Zhao. There was bound to be at least one problem window if he came demanding to examine it. He decided he must get away now, the chap was quite worked up. Could I have the hammer? Sure. This one's right for your job. He showed Zhao how to use the claw to remove the nails. Always best to throw the old buggers out and put in new ones. Take my pliers as well, in case the claw doesn't grip. And this iron block should tee inside the shoe, like a last. Thus equipped, Zhao climbed the stairs to his at. It had been relatively easy. And Edel did seem knowledgeable. Perhaps people complained too much of his shortcomings. Exaggeration, after all, was a human tendency. He dulled with his hearing aid, pretending he couldn't hear Kumi scolding him for taking so long with Edel. He followed her into their stepfather's room, where she placed a tall stool on the bed and told him to climb up. It wobbles. I'll hold it. He hesitated again. What a mess it will make. Shouldn't we cover the furniture, Papa's nice things? For once, use your head. A mess is exactly what we need. He put one foot on the stool, then the other, and remained in a squat till he was sure of his balance. Ready? He asked. She was gripping its legs. Yes, ready. I'm going to stand up now. Shall I clap? Hold the stool tight. He stood and steadied himself, checking if he could touch the ceiling. Yes. He rested the jertips of his left hand against the smooth surface, and immediately felt more stable. Go on, begin. Sighing, he swung the hammer. It landed with a half-hearted thud, raining bits of plaster upon the bed and in Kumi's hair. I just thought of something. What if someone hears the noise? Who? The crows. Only the roof is above us. He continued, creating holes and cracks in the ceiling. Some sections crumbled readily, others resisted. He paused to give his shoulder a rest, and moved to places that were less damaged, following her directions. Isn't that enough? Keep going. Dr. Terrapore removed more plaster from Papa's leg. Finally, she asked him to come down and give his opinion. Does it look genuine? From below, the ceiling appeared worse than when his face had been close to it. He felt sick as he surveyed the wreck, and nodded. Good, we can work on the other side. The stool was placed upon the dresser, he climbed onto it, and did as he was told. From Nariman's room they went to Roxana's old bedroom, then to each of theirs. The ceiling in their mother's room was left intact. Zhao wondered if it might not seem suspicious. Kumi said no, it wouldn't. Because everyone knew that God worked in mysterious ways. She went to the bathroom for a bucket of water and a mug. Is this necessary? He asked. It already looks realistic. There have to be watermarks. What if Yezed wants to check the damage? Every detail of our story should be solid. She began throwing water towards the ceiling, but instead of hitting the target, most of it splashed down upon her. You'll have to get on the stool again. Zhao soaped the broken areas, being liberal with the water as she suggested. If the furniture and door got wet, it would look more natural. Then it was time to clean themselves up, wash the plaster out of their hair, and rehearse how to break the news of this misfortune tomorrow at Parsi General. D. Our Terrapore smiled at the X-ray with satisfaction. The bones had healed well. Quite remarkable, Professor, at your age, with osteoporosis. He instructed Nariman in some simple exercises to be performed sitting down, wriggling the toes, Xing the foot, placing it on the ground and raising the heel. Walking would be restricted to a few steps each day on crutches for the next 4 weeks. Walking, my dear professor, he said, is not a means of taking you from point A to point B. If the crutches are decult, just stay in bed. But don't neglect the exercises. Roxana wished Kumi was there to hear this. She worried Papa would exert more than he should, once he went home. Then it was in a wheelchair to Mr. Rangarajan the plasterer. What a pleasure to meet Professor Vakil's youngest, said Mr. Rangarajan, shaking hands with Roxana. And are you following in your esteemed father's footsteps, as educator and broadener of minds? She shook her head. I'm just a housewife. Just? Mr. Rangarajan was aghast. What are you saying, dear lady? Housewifery is a most important calling, requiring umpteen talents. Without housewife there is no home, without home, no family. And without family, nothing else matters, everything from top to bottom falls apart or descends into chaos. Which is basically the malady of the West. Would you not agree, Professor Vakil? I don't think they have a monopoly, said Nariman. We do quite well here too when it comes to creating miserable families. Mr. Rangarajan laughed. He drew Roxana's attention to the manner of tying the tensor bandage. Basically, it's a gear 8. Please, check the tension I am employing. While Roxana was observing the technique, Zhao and Kumi arrived in a fury of movement and expression, as though they had traveled great distances under inclement conditions. Such a relief to end you, Papa. We asked for Dr. Terrapore, but the receptionist said you had left already. What's wrong? Asked Roxana. Too much, she whispered. I'll tell you in a minute. Now that everyone is assembled, announced Mr. Rangarajan, I will start the bandage at the very beginning. I wonder how long this Gadhera will take, said Kumi in Gujarati. Embarrassed, Nariman intervened. We mustn't detain you any longer, Mr. Rangarajan, your other patients are waiting. Thank you very much for your help. But it is no trouble, thank you, bye-bye, said Kumi. For a moment, Mr. Rangarajan looked ended. But he recovered his poise, wished the professor a speedy recovery, and left. They pushed Nariman's wheelchair into the corridor, parking it by a bench near the window. You won't believe our bad luck, said Zhao, when we tell you what happened last night. The big water tank on the terrace burst, said Kumi, and the ceiling collapsed. She described the roar that had awakened them, and then bits of plaster falling on their beds, which was fortunate. For they were able to jump out before the water soaked in and larger pieces came crashing down. Some were the size of footballs. I must say, Papa, God is watching after you. If you were in your bed last night, a big chunk could have cracked your head. Maybe your broken ankle and moving to Pleasant Villa was God's way of protecting you. Luckily, there was not too much water, said Zhao, uncomfortable with casting God in a supporting role in their deceitful drama. The tank must have been only half full. Both of us shifted to Mama's room, added Kumi. It's undamaged. The only safe place. Strange, said Narimon. It's right next to yours. Who knows, said Zhao. Maybe the terrace is uneven and the water couldn't out that way. Or Mama's ceiling might be stronger. God works in mysterious ways, declared Kumi. Nariman said there was no need to waste time in theological discussions, best to go home, get things back to normal. A broken ceiling did not bother him. The idea was declared absurd in a chorus of disapproval. There could be structural problems, something else might collapse. Besides, Zhao and Kumi were able-bodied. They could run at the RST sign of crumbling, but Papa would be trapped. I'm willing to take the risk, said Nariman. Eventually, Roxana convinced her father to return to Pleasant Villa for a few more days, while the damage was assessed. Kumi promised to send Papa's pension to help with his expenses. I hate putting you and Yezid through more difficulty, said Nariman. Don't be silly, Papa, it's not your fault, said Roxana. An act of God is no one's fault, said Kumi. As they set off for the ambulance, Zhao pushing the wheelchair, Nariman observed that Kumi was getting into the bad habit of burdening God with altogether too much responsibility, and that is good for neither God nor us. In the evening, Yezid heard the news about the ceiling without emotion. He'd had a hunch Zhao and Kumi would not be taking the chief back with them today. Roxana protested they were scarcely to be blamed for the water tank. As Kumi said, it's an act of God. Yes, and his act is mainly in her behalf, isn't it? Must be all her visits to Re Temple and her sandalwood bribes. I might have some in Yuan's too if I went more often. That would be so nice, Yezda, she said eagerly. And you could take the boys with you, Lida Devo. I was just being funny, he interrupted, and her face fell. They helped Nariman up, the crutches were put in place, and, with Yezid's support, he took his RST steps. Slowly, they covered the 4 feet between the settee and the chair. He sat down, wincing with the eort, and the boys clapped. One small step for Grandpa's foot, one giant leap for Grandpa, said Murad. Exactly, he panted. So how was it, Chief? All right. Any pain? Asked Roxana, having seen him wince. A little. But that's to be expected. He remained in the chair till dinner time, when they pushed him closer to the table so he could eat with them. Roxana had made Dondra Patio to celebrate her father's RST steps, though it bothered her that it was without SH. For a small pair of pomfrets, the Machavala had demanded 130 rupees. 90 she could have managed, scrimping on other things, but the rogue had refused to budge. Why should he? People were lined up to buy at his price, the obscene wealth there was in Bombay these days. So here it was, a Schles Dondra Patio, an incomplete celebration. She began to lay the table. I notice you never use my mother's good dishes that I gave you on your wedding, said her father. Naturally, Papa, they're so precious, so old and delicate. Is that a reason to keep them locked up? I am old and delicate, and Zhao and Kumi wanted to keep me locked up. You can't live like that. Use the dishes. How will I ever replace something so valuable if it breaks? Human beings break, and you cannot replace them either. Are dishes more important? All you can do is enjoy the memories. There's my philosopher, said Yezid. You tell her, Chief. Don't encourage Papa. Such inauspicious words when we're celebrating his recovery. Not inauspicious, said her father gently. There's only one way to defeat the sorrow and sadness of life, with laughter and rejoicing. Bring out the good dishes, put on your good clothes, no sense hoarding them. Where is the cut glass vase and the rose bowl from your wedding? The porcelain shepherdess with her lamb? Bring them all out, Roxana, and enjoy them. You're being silly, Papa. Like on your birthday, making Kumi do double work with your demands. The reminder blotted the smile from Nariman's face. What an age it seemed since that evening 2 months ago. When he was still able to stand, dress himself, go to the toilet, go for a walk. Before his fall, before the nightmare with Kumi and Zhao and the commode, the days in bed with his stinking body, frightened and shivering. Roxana at once regretted her words. Their EECT on her father was painful to observe, and she looked to Yezad for help. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Then Jangir cleared his throat like a grown-up about to make an important announcement. Be that as it may, the good plates are on the agenda. Nariman laughed, and Yezid said it was about time this little brown parrot learned some new expressions from Grandpa. Murad pretended to train him. Jihanga sweetie, pretty Jihangu. The good dishes were brought out from the lower section of Yezid's cupboard. The rose bowl took the center of the dining table, and the porcelain shepherdess was assigned the teapoy to graze her charges. Through dinner, Yezid's thoughts kept turning to the days ahead. The morning stress, the overcrowding, the smelly front room, all of it would continue. And providing for one more person, when every rupee was budgeted, meant a shortfall of 20% in Roxana's food envelopes. Not to mention things like soap and washing and doby. About your pension, Chief, said Yezad. How much remains after buying medicines for the month? To be honest, I don't know. Kumi runs the house. I gave her power of attorney for my accounts a long time ago. And what about the ceilings? I should take a look, see how bad the damage is. As far as I am concerned, said Nariman, the damage is irrelevant. Broken plaster is no calamity. Yezad nodded. To voice his money worries now would not help, better to keep a calm, patient demeanor for Roxana's sake. We can manage for another week or so. When the medication ran out and Roxana went to purchase the next lot, she discovered that what Kumi had given her as her father's pension did not cover even the cost of the pills. There had to be some mistake, she thought. Perhaps Kumi had sent a partial amount. The chemist's bill was paid by making up the rents from housekeeping money. To compensate, she bought bread but not butter, and a small tin of cooking oil instead of the more economical large one. Tea, sugar, rice could wait till next week. And dinner would be meatless, just cauliflower with potatoes. She placed the pill bottles on the side table next to her father. He inquired if the money had been enough, and she nodded, convinced that Kumi and Zhao would soon show up with the balance. To Yezed too, when he asked during dinner, she said, "It's okay for now." In the days that followed, her frugalities began to be noticed. At breakfast, Murad grumbled there was no butter on his toast, and Jangir said his tea was bitter, it needed more sugar. Yezad didn't like their fuss. "You boys are spoilt. Be thankful you at least have toast to eat and tea to drink. You know how many millions in the world would be happy to have what you have?" Towards the end of the week, Nariman found it harder to hide the pain in his ankle when he stood on crutches. He had remained silent because the 3 little steps he took went far in sustaining everyone's hope. Then one evening, as he tried to stand, the agony in his ankle made him scream out, the crutches slipped, and he fell back upon the settee. Throwing aside his newspaper, Yezad rushed to him. Roxana ran in from the kitchen. Once they determined he was safe, they grilled him about the scream. He tried to pass it as a sudden twinge, but she saw through it and pried the secret out. "That bloody Terrapore," said Yezad. The quack and a half was in a hurry. Nariman shook his head. "To be fair, we were all relieved when he said I could get up. Don't defend him, Chief. If this was America, we could sue him for millions." But Dr. Terrapore was duly consulted again, and was quite forthcoming about the setback. The X-ray had not lied, the cracks had mended, but calcium deficiency and porous bones had allowed hairline fractures to reopen. The full regimen of bed care was back in force. At least once a day Roxana sat with her envelopes to pore over the contents, debating if she should transfer a few rupees from the one marked milk and tea into the one for butter and bread, or from meat into rice and sugar. Jangir sat with her, asking the price of a slab of Amul butter, a packet of tea, a kilo of mutton, while working out sums in his head and making suggestions. Lost in anxiety, she discussed the Nances with him till she realized what she was doing. "That's enough, Jihengu, money is not your worry. Daddy and I can look after it." Yes, he started, but Daddy will, and though he trailed she understood his fear. A fortnight passed since the ceilings had collapsed. Zhao and Kumi were nowhere in sight, and Yezed refused to call on them, saying he didn't want any favors from those two. "May I make a suggestion?" urged Nariman. "Arguments between you and Roxana will not solve the problem. The pension payment notwithstanding, my expenses have remained unmet. Hence, my instructions are to make a withdrawal from my savings account. My money, which I earned by the sweat of my brow. Simple as that. In short, the question of favors does not arise." "I feel awkward," said Yezid, "to announce we've come to collect Papa's money. If they had any decency, they would have brought it to us." "I have an idea," said Jangir. "You can say you came for Grandpa's walking stick, the one we gave him on his birthday." Yezed chuckled, patted his son's shoulder, and said that was exactly what they would do.